Thank you, everyone. Hi. I don't know if the microphone is working. Yeah, it seems to be working. First of all, thank you for coming to our talk. I hope we can get you excited about the work that we've been doing. I am Ujjwal, and here's Emily. I'll quickly introduce us. And here's me trying to make something out of the first draft of the MessageFormat 2 spec. It's been a while since we started work on this. So I'm from New Delhi in India, and I live in A Coruña. It's a fun city. I love open source software, the web platform. It has taught me everything that I know, and I hope that we can localize it to serve more people. I also like badly designed video games and other things. And I work at Igalia. Over to you, Emily.
Hi, I'm Emily, and I'm working on localization at Mozilla. And as far as I know, I am the only person to work on localization and localization. These are the robotic underwater floats that my dissertation work is based on. They have absolutely nothing to do with today's talk. I just like to be proud of the fact that I work on both localization and localization. So one challenge, no, actually, I lie. There are many challenges with localization these days. And the first part of this is about presenting some of those that we hope to be able to be solved or made more solvable with MessageFormat 2. Then we're going to go on to talking about what is actually MessageFormat 2, what does it look like, and then we're going to continue with some of the next steps of what can be done here. So a big challenge, really, of where we are today is that localization is very much siloed. These are very old silos, but you get the point, I hope. Where you end up picking a solution for localization, mostly often based on developer needs, developer desires, and developer presumptions about how translators and translation works, and then you kind of just go with it. Because, you know, silos can be old or they can be newer, but they're still silos that we are mostly living in. And this becomes difficult to move from one solution to a different solution. You're kind of stuck with it. And the features of the localization systems that you end up with are kind of incidental. And they don't solve all the problems that... No, it was fine. It was fine. They don't solve all the problems that we actually have. And many of those are actually honestly hard problems. This, I could not think of a good image to go for. Inflection. For those of you not so deep into localization and internationalization, inflection is effectively needing, when you have a message, to transform some of the words depending on other words in the message. This doesn't happen so much in English, but for example, Finnish does like, we do suffixes. Our suffixes have suffixes, and those can also have suffixes, and it can go on. And then you can also, of course, change the stem based on this, and it gets a bit complicated. In English, too, you have differences between a and an. So is it a historical account or an historical account, for instance? So there's not even a strict rule-based solution for how this works. And these sorts of problems are difficult to solve. MessageFormat is hopefully providing some of the better solutions here. Another dimension in which MessageFormat is hopefully providing a better solution is when you have messages that you need to localize, but they depend on not just one thing, like the plural category of whether you have one message or three messages, but also when you need to take into account grammatical gender or other aspects at the same time, and you end up with this sort of either a tree structure or a matrix structure of all of these choices of what it is that you're actually localizing and how this works in different languages. and the dimensions that you might need for your source language are not necessarily at all the dimensions you need for your target language, and it gets complicated. So we've been trying to solve this. And the way we've been working on a solution is through standardization, through finding and determining a good new standard for localization that we can build a solution or solutions on top of. We're calling that MessageFormat 2. This work has been ongoing in the Unicode Consortium under the CLDR, LD. There's a lot of acronyms here. I'm going to skip them. Actively for about the last 5 years. But, for example, a lot of this work, the impetus for the current work came from the JavaScript side of things, where we want something like in the JavaScript intel.messageFormat to exist. And the current proposal for what the Intel MessageFormat API looks an awful lot like the proposal we had for it in 2013 when we decided we weren't quite ready to do this yet. So even at the rate of standards, this is slow. But, you know, we're getting there. And with MessageFormat 2, we're hoping to get the final candidate of this out within literally a few months from now. So we're working on it. But what is this MessageFormat 2 that, you know, is gonna solve all the problems of localization in the world? On that, Ujwal, you might take the lead.
Thank you. So, having been done with nuance and all of that, let's go into the dirty details and talk about how not only the syntax looks, but how MessageFormat essentially approaches these complex problems that we talked about in localization, and give the most ergonomic tools to developers and translators alike. So here's a very simple message. It just says, hello FOSDEM, and this is how it looks in sort of the interchange data model that we have. And if you've done localization before, you might notice that this is like maybe 90% of what you do ever, right? Like every single static string on your interface is basically a simple message. So this doesn't need to be more complex than this, and we tried to keep it as simple as we could by not having any syntax for this. But once you start going through some of the more complex things, by which I mean placeholders, you can have variables in your text. So you could have some kind of simple dynamic text which replaces a variable, or you can have markup in these. So for instance, something like this. If you notice, since we're in the inclusive web room, I think markup means something specific to you. But in something that has at least the aspirations of MessageFormat 2, we cannot make very strong assumptions about markup. So the markup has been made to be as generally applicable as possible, but there's certainly some patterns that you can see. But yeah, these markup elements can be either an opening element, a closing element, or some sort of standalone element that doesn't need to be closed. Next, we can have more complex expressions. So we already saw that one earlier, just simple variable replacement, but you can have more interesting things in your expressions. So here you can see that we're calling a function. It's a number function with a style, and since that style is currency, we're supplying the currency. So it's going to format it, keeping all of these things in mind. These function calls are pretty relevant to our work. Basically, we hope to provide people the most common Intel operations that they might need as sort of building blocks for more complex applications, and we also give them the ability to come with their own functions, so they can customize these functions or build entirely new functions. But yeah, they form sort of the building blocks of these various operations that you can do and express things in the message format syntax, and sort of a combination of all of these different things, different placeholders, maybe some markup elements, forms what we call a pattern. So anything like this sort of relatively simple message is a pattern, and it's sort of a combination of various strings, some expressions maybe, and some markup elements. And the most important thing about patterns is that at the end of the day, every single message in message format is the result of formatting a pattern. It can either be a simple pattern like this, or it can be one of many patterns. What do I mean by that? Is you can have matchers. So here we have a variable called count. We use .input because this variable is being supplied by whatever workflow you have, and what you can do is have a match statement with this. In this case, since we're using number, it defaults to doing plural selection, but there's various different things you can do with that. I mean, you can do simple string matching, or you could do things like ordinal matching. All of these different rules that exist in a language, you could sort of build different patterns for each of the cases that you want to handle, and then you can write a message using a matcher so that it finds out which case applies to your message and formats that pattern. So as you can see, we can have different variants, and each of these variants come together as a select message where the final result is one of the different variants. So, okay, well, over to you, Emily.
So one question to ask here, what comes next?
Yeah.
What comes next? After these initial steps. We have a syntax here. You saw some of that. You're not expected to remember all of it, but just we've done a lot of work here, and we hope that it is a sufficiently good syntax that it's going to get adoption, get use, and get to because ultimately what we have now is the behavior of a single message. But if you have a single message that is localized, often you have not one but a whole pile of messages, all possibly relating to each other, that need to be somehow defined together. And for this work, we're kind of bootstrapping and getting onwards with a message resource specification. That is going to define how specifically a message format 2 message is best placed together with others in a file or otherwise. I mean, message format 2 can be embedded in pretty much everywhere in any format that currently allows for embedding messages in different formats, but it's got properties like being naturally multi-line in places that make it not sit in quite so well everywhere. And other needs that we honestly don't have the time to get into. But it's also got, we've identified a lack in that the metadata about a message is not very well defined in the general case. There are some specific instances where there's decent definitions of what is the context for a message coming from a developer or otherwise providing information for translators. But for this, we need to define a better system as a part of the message resource definition work. And to do that, we have been building these tools and are providing tools that hopefully are going to be used to put things together. But we're not providing really a ready solution here. Really, we're providing building blocks for you to put the solutions together. We're not providing a monolith. that does everything that you need. We're doing kind of improvements on the, hang on, he's very eager. Also, we didn't practice this bit as well as we should have. So putting messages together is challenging sometimes. And part of that is because we think messages are complicated and complex, but they're actually not. One thing that was visible in the earlier parts where Ujwal was showing you the syntax, we also have this data model definition of what does the syntax mean. And one benefit that might not be obvious and was not really an intended goal that we had when we started, but just did identify during the work of MessageFormat 2, is that the data model we have for messages is actually really good for representing all messages in all formats that currently exist like this. So you can parse effectively messages from any localization format used by anyone into this one data model and retain all of the information that you have there originally and then move onwards from there. So we're kind of trying with that to also provide a building block for systems to be put together to provide the solutions, provide better monoliths, better silos, because ultimately we're not really here to provide you with a solution for your silo. We're going to make the internals of your silo work better, because it's going to be able to, even if you currently don't use MessageFormat 2 in your messages, because honestly none of you do yet, you could parse your messages into a MessageFormat 2 data model and even have the runtime formatting use a MessageFormat 2 runtime to do so, or do all sorts of other operations for which we are building tools, other people are building tools, and we're looking to kind of build a whole ecosystem here. And one of the ultimate places where we're kind of hoping to go here is to be able to bring MessageFormat 2 and message resources to be directly in HTML, so that in HTML you could declaratively say that this file depends on these localization messages, much like we have CSS defining these days, and then within the HTML say that this item use this message reference to localize, to provide the content for this bit. And that's kind of cool. But this, of course, depends on a whole stack of standards, which we have some of it nearly ready and some of it less ready. And another interesting direction that this is going to enable is considerations of what happens with translation memory. That is, systems that tell you that this thing that you're localizing, translating, it's been localized before, and this is how it was localized before. So translators don't need to repeat the same work over and over again. And with the one data model representing all messages from all formats, it's entirely doable to consider improvements on matching messages, not just in this format that you've done, but what you have previously, and also improve how do you do matching when the message is multivariant. It's got one or multiple things it depends on, and build from there. And we're nearly done with the first part of this, which is the MessageFormat 2 syntax. And here's a very small call to action in that you still have this small window of opportunity to tell us that we've been doing this all wrong, because the MessageFormat 2 spec is still under review. This means that if you, some links here. The first one there is to the MessageFormat working group. If you tell there that this thing is wrong and you should fix this thing or that thing, we might be able to still take you into account or say, we're not going to do it because, you know, reason this and reason that, because honestly, we've been at this for like 5 years, and we've talked about many things, but you still have a little bit of time before we finalize the spec to make sure that we take into account whatever we didn't take into account or might not have taken into account. And there's a whole lot of other work ongoing. The slides are linked to from the FOSDEM presentation, so you don't need to take a photo of this, but you can. There's I mentioned about inflection. We're not providing a ready solution for inflection for anything, because that depends on a lot of data. But the Unicode Consortium is booting up a working group based on quite a bit of data shared by Apple in particular, and a system for working with inflection. But that of course, requires a whole pile of data per language in order to make work. So it's not a universal solution in all systems. The Intel MessageFormat proposal is proceeding in TC39 for JavaScript. That's another place where you might be interested to look at and voice your thoughts. The message resource working group is hopefully going to get finally transferred to the Unicode organization relatively soon, and work from there. There's a JavaScript implementation of the MessageFormat 2 spec that is pretty much complete, and there's a set of tools in Python that we've been working on for our localization needs, specifically at Mozilla. It doesn't do formatting, but it does a lot of everything else you could imagine doing with resources. That might be interesting. Are there any more things we ought to point? Yeah. Oh, yeah. And then the ICU is going to, the internationalization components for Unicode, provided by Unicode, is, together with the release of the MessageFormat 2 spec, going to provide formatters for that, for the C++ and Java implementations. And the ICU4X Rust implementation upcoming as well. But yeah, that's it for us. Thank you for your time and attention.